This is APYouthNet.
Welcome to this edition of the APYouthNet Talk Show, where we talk about youth employment in Asia and the Pacific. From the ILO Youth Employment Program, I'm Matthew Koniak. Over 40% of new HIV infections come from young people. 5 million young people around the world are infected with HIV and AIDS, and 10% are in Asia and the Pacific. Meanwhile, young people suffer the most from unemployment and represent over 40% of all global unemployment. The social and psychological impacts of youth unemployment are well documented. They include rises in depression, crime, violence, but also drug use and sex trade, which, as we know, fuel the spread of HIV and AIDS. To discuss HIV and AIDS at the workplace, I'm joined today by Richard Howard of the ILO and by Tung Bui of Youth Voices Count. Thank you very much to both for joining us on the show today. Young people have grown in a world that has been changed by HIV and AIDS. And Bui, I would like to perhaps start the show with you, because we hear that the stigma and the discrimination is still very real. Can you tell us what sort of discrimination these young people face at the workplace?
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me here in this talk show. And to start with young people HIV, I just want to be a little bit clear to you guys about who are young people living with HIV. So they might be either those who were born with HIV, inherited it from their parents, or who acquired it later in their life. So for those who acquired it later, they might be young men who have sex with men, young sex workers, young women, and young drug users. And for a young person like us, access to a decent and productive employment is the best way to realize our aspirations, improve our living condition, and actively participate in society. However, the reality is it's really hard for young people, in general, to get a decent job now, let alone such young vulnerable groups like people living with HIV. They seem to be stuck in some kind of low paid, no benefit, voluntary, and they stand really small opportunities of getting advancement in their job. For the issues that bar young people from getting decent employment, the first thing is the self-acceptance. They are being young, they are HIV positive. Sometimes it's the level of self-confidence among themselves is very low, so they are not really seem appealing to employers when they come to a job interview, or even have the guts to apply for a job. The second thing is the fear of disclosing their HIV status always haunts them. I mean, they're afraid that their co-workers might know about their status, might abandon them, might boycott them, or they may even accept them in workplace anymore. And compulsory HIV tests is still being practiced in a lot of job application and companies. So young people, they're dealing with a lot of self-issues themselves, but then they afraid of being stigmatized and discriminated in workplace too. So it affects negatively on their working performance. So Richard, if the tests are still compulsory in many organizations, for many employers in this region, for young people to disclose whether or not they are infected by HIV and AIDS, what can young people do about that? What can they do to go around the fact that these tests actually exist, are being implemented?
Well, I mean, if the tests are being implemented, there's not a whole lot you can do to get around it if you want to get a job. So if you have HIV, it's very hard to get a job, particularly in some industries. For example, in Thailand, where we're based, most hotels would do a screening for HIV for their employees. Hotels, restaurant, tourism industries, very difficult to get a job in those sectors. Now, some countries in Asia and the Pacific have passed policies which prohibit this kind of testing, and it's not done. But in many countries, it's still done. So what young people can do, I think they can join with us to advocate to governments, ministries of labor, to change policy or implement the policies they already have. So young people can really play a role in the advocacy, convincing all of us that this testing is not the solution, it's the problem. People with HIV, they can work like anyone else. They can live healthy lives, and they're just as productive as others. So there's simply no reason to do this kind of testing. It just doesn't make sense. It's a waste of money. So we need to do a better job at convincing governments.
Yeah, I think that's for like young PLHIV to get the job. But like during their working time, as you know, the young PLHIV, they have to depend on their treatment. And they have like special healthcare need, maybe like regular checkup in hospital, like drinking ARV, like at the exactly same time every day. So it might like have a little bit like influence on their like leave. They may ask for leaves for health checkup. They might like take the same medicine all the time, like every day. It might arouse like suspicion among their coworkers, or like even if they are not really out with their employer, it might like really result in bad appraisal in their working performance.
Because really, like you said, the young people who are infected by HIV and AIDS today live perfectly normal lives. What should they do to be better, let's say, is there anything that they have to do to be better prepared at the workplace? Is there anything that they have to think about in terms of their preparedness to the workplace that others were not infected by HIV and AIDS? No?
Well, I mean, in terms of transmission risk, there's really no risk. I mean, virtually no risk in any sector for someone with HIV to work alongside other people. Casual transmission, it doesn't take place. HIV is really hard to transmit. You know, you have to pass blood from one person to another, or semen or vaginal fluid, and you just don't do that at work unless unless you're a sex worker maybe. But normally in most industries we're not doing this kind of thing, so completely safe. That's the bottom line. And the ILO position is that there is no industry that should do mandatory testing. Not one, not even the health sector. And the second issue that points back to what you mentioned is that workplaces should, if a person requests it, provide what we call reasonable accommodation in the ILO. That they can, some minor adjustments to workflows or work schedules based on particular needs of someone for their health conditions, so about taking medication, doctor's visits, these kind of things can be worked out. Bottom line, they produce just as much as anyone else.
And yet stigma and discrimination still exists. It's very prominent. It's still very strong at the workplace.
Oh, definitely.
For that, young people need to be informed, I suppose, of their rights and to be better prepared. Where can they find this information? Where can they find information relating to their rights, their preparation prior to entering? Because there's also on their end, I suppose, a lot of apprehension prior to applying for specific jobs.
Well, I think that, I'll let you come in a minute, but I think we have to also say, and it's really the responsibility of employers to get the information so that they eliminate the stigma and discrimination in their workplace, not only towards people with HIV, but also towards the people in this region who have a tendency to get more HIV more often. So that includes gay men, transgendered people, even drug users, sex workers. So workplaces need to be a little more sensitive to the diversity we have in the workforce.
But I mean, is there any specific, let's say, website or documentation or any specific information you would like to mention for those who are watching us today?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me answer a little bit from like a young person. I mean, for online document, IPPF International has developed one document called Positive Living for young positive people. So they can consult it online on IPPF International website. And the youth movement like recently has been really strong in terms of like addressing the decent employment for among young people and addressing particularly like those vulnerable groups, young youth group. And you guys can actually consult with a lot of websites on youth movement, for example, like the ICPD, the post-2015, post-2014 development agendas and stuff. And young people have like a full access to those websites. And yeah, they can actually like consult with a lot of youth movement in their country and their local for information in terms of HIV/AIDS treatment or like their rights in workplace.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for these young people. This is the end of our show. Next week, we are going to come back and talk about the role of society at large. What is the role of the United Nations, of NGOs, civil society, and of course governments in the region? What can they do? What can the employers and trade unions do to address this issue of HIV and AIDS at the workplace? And we'll be joined by you again, Richard and Bowie. So stay tuned and see you again next time. Goodbye.
This has been an AP YouthNet production.